Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Victoria Morgan stood on the balcony of her family's mansion, the warm evening wind brushing against her dark, radiant skin. She had always believed that love would protect her from the chaos of her family's expectations. Daniel Cole, her fiancé, was everything she thought she needed, kind, ambitious, and devoted. Together, they dreamed of building a future rooted in mutual respect and unbreakable loyalty. As they planned their wedding, Victoria's younger sister, Caroline, seemed to admire her happiness, always smiling, always helping with the preparations. Yet beneath those smiles is something dangerous, something Victoria's pure heart refused to see. In the days leading up to the engagement ceremony, subtle things began to change. Whispers cut off when she entered a room. Uneasy glances exchanged between Daniel and Caroline, and her mother, Margaret, suddenly insisting on Caroline being more involved in the wedding details. Victoria brushed it all off, determined not to imagine betrayal where there should be none. But fate, as it often does, had already begun rewriting her story. The night before her engagement, Victoria overheard laughter, Daniel's voice intertwined with Caroline's in the guest lounge. What she saw through the slightly open door shattered her world. The next morning, the house buzzed with excitement. Guests were arriving, caterers lined the driveway, and flowers perfumed the air. But inside Victoria, something had died. She dressed in her cream gown, every thread now feeling like a mockery of love. Her hands trembled as she held the ring Daniel had given her, its brilliance dim compared to the dull ache in her chest. When the ceremony began, Caroline was nowhere to be seen until she walked moments later, holding Daniel's hand. Gasps filled the hall as Margaret rose to her feet, a forced smile curling her lips. Caroline announced, "I'm the one Daniel truly loves." Her voice was steady, cruelly confident. The world around Victoria went silent. Daniel avoided her gaze, his guilt drowned beneath Caroline's radiant deceit. The guests watched in shock as Victoria's dreams were ripped from her, publicly, brutally. No one defended her, not even her mother. That night, Victoria packed her bags in tears, her heart bleeding from betrayal she couldn't comprehend. She walked out of the mansion barefoot, vowing never to return. The city lights blurred through her tears as she vanished into the night, forgotten by those she loved most. 5 years is a long time, long enough for pain to harden into strength. In those years, Victoria became someone unrecognizable. She worked quietly in another city, using her gift for art to heal and survive. Her dark complexion glowed under the sun as she painted stories of loss, forgiveness, and rebirth. Her works began catching attention in London's art circles. Yet, even with success blooming, the memory of that betrayal remained carved into her soul like a scar that refused to fade. She met Ethan Williams one rainy evening when he bought one of her pieces at an auction. Tall, refined, and commanding, the billionaire art investor had an aura of power softened by gentleness. He saw beyond her quiet demeanor, sensing the fire that life had tried to extinguish. Over time, he became her friend, her mentor, and eventually the man who helped her believe in love again. But Victoria wasn't the same naive woman from 5 years ago. Her eyes now carried wisdom, her silent strength. What she didn't know was that destiny was preparing to bring her back, face to face with those who had buried her. The Morgan mansion was alive again, this time for Caroline's 35th birthday gala. Invitations were sent to every elite family in London, complete with golden calligraphy and the family crest embossed on thick ivory paper. Among the recipients was Victoria, whose name sparked unease in Margaret's heart the moment the secretary confirmed delivery. For 5 years, they had pretended she didn't exist, buried her memory under lavish parties and newspaper features about Caroline's perfect marriage to Daniel. Victoria received the invitation in her art gallery, her hand trembling as she read the familiar handwriting. Ethan noticed her silence and gently took the card from her. "You don't owe them your presence," he said softly, his dark eyes filled with concern. But Victoria smiled faintly. "Sometimes," she whispered, "healing means walking to the fire that once burned you." That night, she decided she would attend, not for revenge, but for closure. She would face her past not as the broken woman they discarded, but as a woman reborn with grace, confidence, and a billionaire by her side. The week before the gala felt like a dream Victoria had already conquered. She worked with her designer to craft a gown that radiated elegance and quiet power, a floor-length emerald dress that shimmered against her dark skin like moonlight on the ocean. Ethan arranged everything. A limousine, a diamond necklace that once belonged to his grandmother, and a quiet promise to stand beside her no matter what. This time, he said, they'll see who you become. On the day of the event, Victoria stood before her mirror, her reflection a vision of grace and resilience. Memories flashed, Caroline's laughter, Daniel's betrayal, Margaret's indifference. But instead of pain, she felt peace. The past had taught her how to rise, how to rebuild herself without apology. As Ethan entered the room, dressed in a black tuxedo that highlighted his royal bearing, he offered his arm with a smile. "Ready to make history?" he asked. She took his hand and whispered, "I already did." Together, they stepped into the night, into the storm she once feared, now stronger than ever before. The gala was grander than anything Victoria remembered. Chandeliers dripping with crystals, violins humming softly, and cameras flashing as society's elite mingled in designer gowns. When the limousine door opened, silence rippled through the entrance. Ethan stepped out first, tall and composed, then offered his hand to Victoria. Gasps echoed as she emerged, the very image of success and beauty. Every eye followed her, every whisper laced with disbelief. Inside, Caroline froze mid-laughter when she saw her sister. Her wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor. Daniel, now a shadow of his former self, blinked as if seeing a ghost. Even Margaret, ever poised, faltered, her face pale beneath her makeup. Victoria smiled politely at the stunned crowd, her every step radiating confidence. The reporters whispered, "That's Victoria Morgan, the forgotten sister. And that's Ethan Williams with her." Cameras flashed wildly as she moved through the room, graceful as royalty. For the first time in years, the power was hers, not born from arrogance, but from survival. Dinner was served, but no one tasted a thing. Caroline tried to act unfazed, laughing too loudly at Daniel's forced jokes, her perfect life suddenly cracking. Margaret kept glancing toward Victoria, uncertain whether to speak or pretend she didn't exist. Ethan, ever calm, whispered softly to Victoria, grounding her amidst the tension. "They don't define you," he said. She smiled faintly. "I know," she replied, her voice carrying the peace of a woman who had already forgiven herself. During the toast, Caroline couldn't hold back any longer. "How wonderful of my sister to join us," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Victoria raised her glass slowly, her dark eyes shimmering under the chandelier. "Yes," she replied. "It's lovely to see everyone again, especially those who taught me what love isn't." The words struck deep, silencing the hall. For a brief moment, no one moved. Ethan's hand brushed hers under the table. Quiet support from a man who understood her pain without words. After dinner, the guests mingled in the grand hallway where portraits of the Morgan family hung proudly, all except Victoria's. Caroline followed her sister quietly, fury simmering beneath her painted smile. "Why did you come back?" she hissed. "To embarrass me?" Victoria turned slowly, her emerald dress glowing under the chandeliers. "No," she said softly. "I came to remind you that the truth always finds its way back." Margaret joined them, her expression tight with regret and pride tangled together. "Victoria," she began, "perhaps it's time we talk privately." But Ethan stepped forward, his tone calm yet commanding. "She owes you nothing," he said. Caroline's eyes widened. "Who are you to speak here?" Ethan smiled faintly. "The man who stood beside her when you all turned your backs." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. For the first time, Caroline and Margaret realized that Victoria hadn't just returned. She had ascended far beyond their reach. As the night deepened, the master of ceremonies announced a surprise, a donation from Ethan Williams to the Morgan Charity Foundation. Cameras turned toward him as he stood, announcing not only his gift but also his partnership with Victoria Morgan, founder of her own art charity supporting underprivileged children. Gasps filled the hall. The once forgotten sister was now a visionary admired by the elite. Caroline's smile broke. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, realizing how far he had fallen from the woman he once betrayed. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She had chosen society over her own daughter, and now society applauded the very strength she had tried to suppress. Victoria looked around the room, not with pride, but with quiet acceptance. She had no desire to humiliate anyone. Her victory was in peace, not revenge. Yet her presence itself was poetic justice, the living proof that grace shines brightest after pain. Near the end of the gala, Caroline cornered Victoria near the garden terrace, her voice trembling. "You think you've won," she spat. "You stole my spotlight." Victoria looked at her, unshaken. "I didn't take anything from you, Caroline. You took what was never meant for you." The bitterness in Caroline's eyes melted into something almost human, fear, maybe even regret. Daniel appeared moments later, his eyes dull, his once charming face now hardened by guilt. He tried to speak, but Victoria stopped him gently. "Daniel," she said, "I've forgiven you, but forgiveness isn't an invitation back into my life." Her tone was firm, kind, and final. Ethan appeared behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder, a symbol of her new life, her new strength. Under moonlight, her dark skin glowed like polished bronze. She turned back to the hall one last time and whispered to herself, "I'm free." And for the first time since that cruel night 5 years ago, she truly was. The night after the gala, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, the city lights flickering like memories she once buried. Ethan found her there, barefoot in a silk robe, lost in thought. "You faced them beautifully," he said. She smiled faintly, though her eyes shimmered with tears. "I didn't expect it to still hurt," she whispered. "Forgiveness doesn't erase pain," Ethan replied softly. "It only frees you from carrying it." His words lingered in her chest, steadying her heart. Meanwhile, Caroline paced in a luxurious bedroom, tormented by what she'd seen. Victoria had returned stronger, radiant, loved, everything she herself had pretended to be. Daniel slept beside her, his indifference cutting deeper than guilt. Caroline realized she hadn't stolen happiness. She'd stolen misery dressed as victory. The life she built on deceit was beginning to crumble, one crack at a time. 2 days later, tabloids exploded with headlines. "Forgotten Morgan daughter returns with billionaire investor." Photograph from the gala covered every page. Victoria's poised beside Ethan, her grace overshadowing Caroline's forced smile. Social media lit up with praise for Victoria's transformation, while critics tore into Caroline's arrogance. Margaret tried to control the narrative, but truth moves faster than manipulation. Daniel's business suffered too. His partnership deals began to dissolve as investors questioned his loyalty and integrity. For years he had built his reputation on charm, but now his betrayal was public record. Caroline blamed Victoria for the downfall, but deep inside, she knew the empire had been built on lies from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Victoria refused to give interviews or boast. She poured her energy into her art gallery, letting her work speak the truth the world needed to hear. Margaret arrived at Victoria's gallery one afternoon, unannounced. Her presence drew stares from staff and visitors alike. Victoria greeted her politely, maintaining her composure. "You've built something beautiful," Margaret said softly, her voice trembling with regret. "I should have stood by you." Victoria's gaze softened but remained guarded. "You chose appearances over love, Mother. That choice destroyed us all." For the first time in years, Margaret wept, not the tears of guilt, but awakening. "You were always stronger than I ever allowed you to be," she said. Victoria placed a hand over her mother's, not in reconciliation, but acknowledgement. "We can't rewrite the past," she whispered, "but we can stop pretending it didn't happen." The moment was raw and fragile. A door cracked open, not fully, but enough to let healing light in. Months later, Victoria hosted a charity gala under her gallery's banner. Art of Healing. Celebrities, philanthropists, and artists gathered beneath glowing chandeliers to celebrate resilience through creativity. Ethan stood proudly beside her as she addressed the audience. "Pain doesn't define us. she said into the microphone, her dark skin glistening under the stage lights. "It refines us. I once lost everything I thought I needed and found myself instead." Among the guests were Caroline and Daniel, invited by Ethan at Victoria's request. The crowd gasped as they entered, but Victoria didn't flinch. Instead, she welcomed them with calm dignity. Caroline could barely meet her gaze. It was a humbling scene, the woman she had tried to destroy now extending grace without bitterness. Victoria's strength illuminated the room more powerfully than any diamond or fortune ever could. Later that evening, Caroline requested a private word. They met on the gallery terrace, moonlight draping the city below. Caroline's voice shook as she spoke. "I was jealous. You were always loved, and I wanted to feel that, even if it meant stealing what was yours." Her tears smeared her makeup, the facade finally falling. Victoria watched her, expression unreadable, heart torn between justice and compassion. "I've hated you for years," Victoria confessed quietly, "but I realized hatred only chained me to the past. I'm free now, Caroline, not because of revenge, but because I chose peace." Caroline nodded, her shoulders trembling. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Victoria stepped closer, her voice soft yet firm. "Maybe not, but I'll give it anyway." And with those words, generations of pain began to dissolve, not forgotten, but finally released. Daniel's empire collapsed within months. Mismanagement, scandal, and debt consumed him. Caroline, once the glamorous wife, found herself ostracized by the same society that once envied her. She moved out quietly, stripped of luxury and reputation. Daniel, broken and bitter, realized too late that he'd lost the one woman who truly loved him, Victoria. But she had long since outgrown him. When Ethan heard about Daniel's downfall, he said nothing. Victoria only sighed. Life teaches through consequences. Instead of gloating, she donated anonymously to one of Daniel's failing community projects, ensuring workers kept their jobs. Ethan smiled. "You always choose light, even when darkness would be easier." Victoria replied simply, "That's how I win." Her grace became her weapon and her legacy. Weeks later, Ethan planned a private evening at the gallery after hours. Candles flickered around her favorite paintings, each one representing a phase of her life. Pain, loss, rebirth, and peace. As she admired the final piece titled Freedom, Ethan knelt behind her, holding a velvet box. "You've painted your soul across these walls," he said softly. "Let me be the man who stands beside you through every new chapter." Victoria turned, eyes wide and glistening. "Ethan," she whispered, emotion flooding her. He smiled. "Not to save you, Victoria. You save yourself. I just want to walk with you." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she breathed. 1,000 times, yes." The lights dimmed, and the room echoed with the soft music of two hearts finally at peace. The news of Victoria's engagement swept across media. From betrayal to billionaire love, Victoria Morgan's inspiring journey. The same people who once whispered about her downfall now hailed her as a symbol of resilience. Invitations flooded her gallery. Journalists begged for exclusives, but she remained grounded, focusing on art and community. Caroline, now living modestly, watched one of the interviews online. Instead of envy, she felt something new, admiration. For the first time, she wanted to be better, not richer. She reached out to Victoria, offering to volunteer at her charity. Victoria accepted with cautious grace, proving that transformation was possible for anyone brave enough to face themselves. Months later, Victoria revisited the Morgan mansion for the first time in years. The once oppressive halls now felt smaller, gentler, as if time had softened their shadows. Margaret welcomed her with trembling hands and misty eyes. "You've made me proud," she whispered. The family portrait still hung, but now, beside them, a new one joined the wall. Victoria's official portrait, radiant in emerald green, symbolizing rebirth. As they gathered for dinner, laughter replaced tension. Even Caroline's quiet humility filled the space with warmth rather than rivalry. Ethan joined them, his presence commanding yet kind. For the first time, the Morgans dined not in pretense, but in peace. The storm that tore them apart had given birth to something rare, truth. 1 year later, Victoria opened her second art gallery, Phoenix and Grace. The opening ceremony was grand but intimate, attended by leaders, artists, and dreamers from across the world. Ethan stood beside her as husband and partner, proud and fulfilled. Caroline curated a small corner of the exhibition, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. In her speech, Victoria said softly, "I once believed betrayal destroyed me, but it only revealed who I truly was meant to be." The audience rose in applause as she concluded. From pain came purpose, from rejection came revelation, and from forgiveness, freedom. Under the glowing lights, her dark skin shimmered like midnight silk, and her story, once written in tears, now ended in triumph. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.